Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Welcome back to Houselights, specifically the House of Linklater, or at least we're building a small addition. Maybe this is a summer house of Linklater or like a guest house of Linklater out in the backyard. That's what he's in, the Kato Kalin suite of Houselights. And we are Houselights, and we are bringing you this look at 2004's Before Sunset. Not before sunrise, before sunset. A lot of time of day shift here going on. And I am joined by two wonderful conversationalists, Tristan Riddell and Darren Moser. And me, I'm the grumpy man smoking a cigarette behind them in a Parisian cafe, John Mills. And we are delighted to have you along here for what could be considered the Empire Strikes Back of romantic film trilogies. Or is it? I don't know. We'll find out because it's Darren's first time seeing it.
Bold words,
there you go.
John. Bold words.
There you go. There you go. And Tristan and I, we have witnessed the journey with Before Sunset previously. And I'm going to do two things right here before I kick it to Darren, because Darren, since you're the newbie with viewing these films, obviously it's going to get kicked over to you. But the first thing I want to say is that we will minimize, as three married men with children, exactly how terrible Ethan Hawke really is for what he does in this film, for Jesse as a character, because look, it's a movie. We're not going to get too deep in the real world stuff. So we'll save that. We'll table it. We'll walk away. We'll all say, I don't think any of the three of us would have done the same thing, and leave it at that. So Darren, this is your first time here, and you went into Before Sunrise cold, and you're coming into Before Sunset. There's a third movie coming in, so there's a little bit of a spoiler there. This was a bit of a surprise, I guess, in Ethan Hawke's own words. Nobody asked them to make this movie. They did it because they wanted to. First impression coming in when the movie starts, not the whole film, but the movie starts, first couple of minutes, was your sense of, good, we're coming back and this feels authentic again? Or did it take more time to warm up to you to get you to come back into the story?
No, it slid right back in, primarily because, this movie's only 80 minutes. So you say the first few minutes, like that's a good chunk of the movie anyway.
It is a percentage, yes.
And yeah, pretty much right away, we're setting up the bookstore and the signing, and you can tell he wrote about, the previous movie, which I just watched last week. So I'm all caught up. And then he sees her. And that's really the moment of like, oh, she's here. She's actually here in front of me. And then we start like a single shot of them walking throughout the rest of the movie. I know they're cuts, but it feels very singular focused from then on. So yeah, I didn't know, was this going to be the 6 months later when they got together? And it wasn't. It's been real time-ish. It's been at least a decade or so. He's got
9 years.
9 years. Yep. Yeah. So he has a little kid, and we'll talk about marriage, a little later about that. But it's interesting where on its surface, I think this was a worthy story to tell, but it also had aspects of checking the boxes. Like, did we find out who actually went 6 months later? Yes, we did. Check. Did we find out, if they actually slept together? Check. Like kind of those questions that bubbled up from the end of the first one. We answered all those. So maybe that's what sequels are supposed to do. But we still were left on a little bit of a cliffhanger. So yeah, I didn't know really what to expect, but this was a great helping of this particular story. This is a very interesting concept of diving back in every 10 or so years.
So were you surprised by the disposition of the characters? Was it surprising that Jesse was married? Was it surprising that she didn't show, but he did? Were there any surprises along the way that you didn't see telegraphed in any way? Or rather, a better way to say it, that truly took an unexpected turn for you?
Not particularly. It's hard. Do you mean telegraph throughout this movie or telegraph from the first movie?
Telegraph was bad. That's why I was trying to walk that back. Was were there any story points though? Sometimes you watch a movie and it's going along and a character says something or does something and you go, oh, I didn't see that coming. It seemed a surprise? Like, was it a surprise that Jesse actually went back 6 months later and has sort of been nursing that ache ever since? Was it a surprise that he was married? Was it a surprise that Celine wasn't?
I don't think surprised is the right word because, again, there's very little frame of reference for this story except for the one night they've had. So I kind of have no expectations. The thing that surprised me the most was their kind of joking mannerisms of false truths and haha just kiddings, which very much we saw in the first one, especially with Ethan Hawke's character, where he'd be like, oh yeah, I'm married, oh just kidding, oh but I actually did show up, no I didn't. And it started to almost grate where I'm like, can we just say what we mean instead of, because I'm pretty sure every time you talk you are speaking the truth, but I'm starting to wonder because they're popping in more and more as this story is unfolding. So yeah, it, like even for her, she was like, oh yeah, I totally remember us having sex, even though for a chunk of the movie, she's like, no, we didn't. And I'm like, okay. So it felt like that was a through thread from the first movie of this way they communicate with kind of jokes and yeah, I'm just kidding and backtracks, which was an interesting thing to bring through. Like I wasn't expecting that. So that was kind of the only surprise I got.
Tristan, that's an interesting thread to pull on there is, do you think that the casual dishonesty that the characters have with each other at certain moments, do you think that that adds any layer of realism to two people who are trying to figure out each other again? They were only together for one night and they spend roughly an hour and a half together here. Do you think that casual dishonesty is more authentic because they're being more defensive? Or do you think that it's, is it just something we're used to people stating their feelings more plainly in film?
It's like, that makes me angry.
Right.
No, I totally get what Darren is saying. And Darren, I think if I saw this for the first time after watching the first one for the first time, I would probably feel more like you do now, because I think you have a solid point. But for me, I think, like, if you look at the first one, if you look at Sunrise, they spent all night together, walking around, having several different kinds of conversations. They got to know each other over the course of, 12 hours, something like that. And with this one, it's just 90 minutes. And it's after 9 years of an adult's lifetime is a very long time. And so to me, I think it's Sunrise was an experiment for both of them. Like, they both went into it with complete honesty. Like, you could tell that they were having that moment where, like, I have a real connection with this person. And so why would I BS my way through a conversation just trying to get them into bed, or like putting on like a persona just to like show how cool you are? Like, this one was just, the first one was brute and honesty. And this one, there's much more trepidation. There was much more like, where are we? What is this? Who are we to each other? Are we in love? Were we ever in love? Like, we got a lot of baggage coming into this. And so I feel like we get a peek into Jesse's defense mechanism, where he wants to be that brutally honest person that he was in the 90s in Vienna, so much so that he wrote about it. Like, and he's worried, like, he's like, oh man, I wrote a book about this, and now I'm with you, and I wrote a book about it, and I wrote a book about it so that you'd read it and maybe reach out to me. And so I'm taking this very seriously, but he has no idea if she's taking it as seriously as he is. And so I feel like that, like, oh yeah, no, totally, I'm married. No, I'm just kidding. It's fine. I think it's a much older Jesse, but I don't think it's necessarily a more mature Jesse. And I think he's trying to figure things out with Celine. That's how I took it.
Yeah, I mean, that's I think a question that I think is there throughout the film, is this idea that I'll throw this out on the floor. I take a lot of this, and just from my first viewing, this viewing, other viewings, that in a sense their experiment in Before Sunrise kind of ruined them for the next stage of their life, because it left them with, and the fact that they never got together again in that time period, they didn't meet that 6 months later, that's what ruined them, because they never had a reason not to.
Like unresolved love.
idealize, fetishize, and romanticize what had happened that night. They are left to stew on it. And I think that's a very honest sort of thing to look at how human beings can take a moment in time and idealize it and make it so much in their mind. Like, it's a very special night. It's a great night, but they obviously both never really moved on from it. And I think that is what makes a lot of it very interesting, because you see this, I think with Jesse, what's interesting about his character in this film is you see that he became the cynic he never wanted to be. Why did I get married? Well, she got pregnant, so I'm supposed to get married. And I didn't, this isn't what he wanted his life to be. And so he's having his midlife crisis, basically. And the book is an attempt to exorcise that demon while at the same time tempting fate to take him back there again, sort of thing. And I mean, Darren, just to go with that, do you think that there is something true about the human condition, about the predilection that people have for romanticizing the past, like glossing over it and looking at it? Do you think that that is the core truth of this movie, or do you think that it's getting at another message?
No, I can see that. I think, for these two characters, them not meeting 6 months later totally messed them up. But it's an interesting thing with this story because, like you said, they're slowly revealing to each other over these 80 minutes. They're very guarded as they're releasing little bits of information like, oh, I am married. Oh, I have a kid. Oh, but we're not happy. Oh, but I'm married too, but he's always away. And they're only really real with each other at the very end. I would almost rather, I know this changes the whole story, but I would almost rather have had it been they have this super spark of a moment when they first see each other and we get more of that total honesty. It's almost like if in the very beginning, they're both like, hey, what if we just changed our lives to be together? And then the rest of the movie is about why would or wouldn't that work as the other dominoes fall into place, as they're picking at the rest of their life of how you can't just unspool a life that you've already lived. But instead, we get that moment, and I'm not saying it's wrong, we just get that moment at the end of this segment as we're slowly building of like, well, what's going to happen now? And obviously we'll find that out in a decade. But I know that completely changes the premise of this movie, but it's an interesting thought of, I want to see that conversation. I want to see them being like, well, we could get a place together, but I want to see my son. Ooh. And there's so many good stories that are told with, I want to do this, but this. And then we could do this, but that. Like that ebb and flow of narrative structure. I want to see these two characters kind of battle it out in their minds of trying to make this relationship work. But that's obviously not what we get. We get that is the conversation that could happen after the credits roll. But instead, it's, the guarded tidbits of life. And then there's some parts of it that starts to stew of feeling like a movie, as so far as like, we aren't liking Jesse. Jesse's kind of, why is he kind of going down this road? And he's like a married person with a kid. And then they throw in that line of, oh, but we're not happy. And I don't really love her like I should love her. And it totally feels like, we put this in here so that you emotionally as a viewer have a little bit of an out to kind of like Jesse again. Oh, but they're not happy. So everything he's contemplating and doing right now is a different lens. I know we're,
I think that's very fair. Tristan, you go ahead.
Well, I think that is absolutely fair. I think that is 100% what they were doing.
Yeah.
But at the same token, a person who is happy in his marriage, someone who is very much in love and loves his spouse and has a happy life with a happy child and a happy home and a happy fence, all those kind of things, wouldn't be having this kind of conversation with another woman anyway, regardless of how great a past event was. Like, say that I all of a sudden was like, no, but I don't have a Celine in my life, like if I ran into like, I don't know, someone who I had an amazing day with or an amazing date with, someone that was just like really passionate, we were going to meet together and everything like that. Like say, but I was happily married, you know, there wouldn't be any tension there. We wouldn't
Right.
have a drama. It would be like, oh, it's nice to meet you. I'm glad we're reconnecting. You know, it would be boring. It would be boring. But to have the character of Jesse be in a crap marriage and have him repeat the mistakes of his own parents of getting pregnant, having to get married, feeling like you have to get married, and then, you know, like flirting with divorce and everything like that allows this movie to happen. That allows this conversation to happen.
It does. They do. To be fair, it's not just a one line. He talks about the fact that they've been to marriage counseling. He's tried to do all of these things, but we are only getting Jesse's perspective in that moment, which there's all of those sorts of layers that go along with it. I think that it's an interesting lens on when I was saying this earlier, it's an interesting lens on a midlife crisis sort of guy who's realizing that life is about obligation and commitments that you've made sometimes, and everybody can agree on that sort of thing. Like do you want to work 40 to 80 hours a week? No, I do not. However, I must. And those sorts of things. That's just part of life. I mean, if anything, Jesse's in the catbird seat because he's an author who's traveling the globe promoting a book that's a bestseller in the United States. It's kind of like, it'd be very easy for somebody to look at that and be like, bro, what are you complaining about? Your life's okay compared to the average person in the world. You know, it's not so bad. But people will, and I think he acknowledges this at one point, but like my big question then is, Darren, at what point during all of their conversation do you first pick up that Jesse is realizing that he's still in love with Celine? Because he is defensive at first. At what point do you see Jesse crack? And it's not necessarily that he says anything to her. It's that is there something that in Hawk's mannerisms or in a look that he gives that says to you, oh, he's figuring out he is still in love with her?
Yeah, I would say when he takes her phone to call the driver, because by that point, he is then starting to elongate the time together. And this movie does it really great where it's like, and then and then we'll take a cab and then I'll walk you to your door and then we'll have some tea. And it's like, you could tell he has no intent. By the end, you're like, oh, he has no intention of catching that plane. Like he wants to continue this time together. So in my head canon, he sent himself a text from her phone as soon as he was given her phone, because he was never going to lose the ability to contact her again. We don't show that and we don't see that. It's not alluded at all. But I'm like, if I was in this weird situation, like I would not risk that at all. But so that's my moment, I would say. But I do want to give credit to this story. This is a good story being told. If the story had been, oh yeah, neither of us are married and we don't have kids and we both have jobs that let us travel and we actually live in the same country and oh, I just happen to not run into you, that's boring. Then it's basically the December meetup just 9 years later. But instead, having lived and roots put down, and you notice these kind of few moments that they could have maybe by chance had seen each other. But it's a very interesting tale. But yeah, so that's my headcanon, all to say, is that as he starts to elongate their time together, and starts to consider his next steps, especially with the phone.
Tristan, where do you see it?
Well, actually, one thing I do want to talk about, if I could shift gears just a little bit.
Sure.
Is,
Darren, are we going to let him shift gears? Is that okay?
Totally shift gears. I shift gears mid-sentence all the time. I don't know what you're talking about, John.
All right, we'll both allow it, Tristan. It's fine.
Because we're ragging on Jesse a lot, which is fine. He deserves to be ragged on. There was one moment in particular where they're running around and then he sits down on a bench and then like grabs her and then makes her sit on his lap. And I'm like, how old are you? Mm-hmm. Like when I was watching that in 2003, I was in high school and I was like, I don't even know if I could get away with that. Like as a high schooler, as someone who's like 17 or 18. But I think it just gave a peek into the image, like a portion of the immaturity of Jesse. But at the same token, I think if you look at Celine, like there are times when she's not the same person either that she was in Vienna. Like she's lived life too. Like she's gone in, when she was talking about trying to get pencils, or when she was talking about the cop, saying that she needed to buy a gun, which was a true story, by the way, that actually happened to Julie Delpy, the whole cop and a gun thing. It just like you can tell that she gets angrier. She, I don't want to say flies off the handle, but like she gets bigger in her emotions than she did in the 90s. Like in the 90s, she was just kind of wry and, sardonic and things like that. Here, like you can see that she has legitimate frustrations, anger that kind of have amplified over the past 9 years. And so they both have lived, they both have changed. And so they're both asking each other that question of, do I want to be with this person? Celine is asking the question, he's married, he has a kid, so he's off limits. But then as he keeps talking, she's like, does he not think he's off limits to me? And he's questioning his entire life, saying like, she's off limits because I'm married, but what if I leave her? What if I leave her? I'll take Henry with me. I'll figure it out. I'll get a good lawyer. You can see the wheels spinning in his head. But then like there's certain times when he's just kind of like, like he kind of makes fun of her in the taxi cab, talking about how she got crazy. There was some truth in that joke to him, I'm saying, and from his perspective. I'm not saying that she is crazy. I'm saying that like for a guy to make that joke, it's usually because there's a kernel of truth to it. So John, I wanted to know, like Darren, you talked about how you would have liked to have seen a movie where they talked about how they would get together. I think we watched that movie personally. I feel like we saw that kind of develop over the course of the entire movie. It just wasn't explicit, in my opinion. And John, I want to know from your perspective, do you feel like you got a good look at the inner workings of their minds, or was it really just Jesse we got to see frustrated, or like, what do you think?
No, I'll just jump right in there. I think we did get a good glimpse at their minds. I'll answer a couple of things here where, for me, I think Jesse realizes he's still in love with her when they sit down in the cafe, and the conversation, it's as if they never stopped. That's the moment at which the conversation becomes comfortable again. And I think specifically in that scene, if you look at the way that it is edited, it spends a lot of time focused on Jesse's facial reactions to her talking. And I think that's a conscious choice to show Jesse. We get to see his face soften and his eyes brighten a little bit as he realizes, we do still have a thing. It was an authentic thing that happened back in, like, it's almost like a validation of his idealization of the night. But I think we did see the inner workings of both of these people. And Tristan, I think it's something where there's a point in their conversation where they talk about whether people change over time. And Jesse says something along the lines of, there are certain guide points to a personality. And he talks about people winning the lottery and suffering a terrible physical accident. And he says, and that after 6 months, they essentially revert back to the type of person they always were. And
that was a real study, by the way.
Yeah. And he cites that. And I think that's their way of saying these are the same basic people. And so we have seen them. They're allowing us just to pick up and understand that. And I think the complicated thing is I typically have a real dislike of movies that indulge making it okay to break a trust like a marriage. But I think that what's really deft about the way this movie is put together and the way that it's performed is it's the same type of Rorschach test at the end. Do you presume that they immediately have a passionate lovemaking session, or is this just when the credits roll, the conversation continues and they don't necessarily do that? Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but it continues along the lines where they then have it. Like, I think it's what you're talking about, Darren, where at the end, do you believe that the conversation continued and then they had the deeper mechanics of it? Look, this is obviously working. I need to leave. Jesse's saying, I need to leave my wife no matter what. It doesn't matter whether we're together or not. You've made me realize the type of love I need in my life. And she conversely can say, I suddenly realized that I need some sort of way to express myself openly, because what we learned through the course of this is she doesn't feel the ability to express herself as openly to another human being the way that she does to Jesse. It's not that she needs another person. She says herself, I'm an independent, strong woman. I don't need somebody else. But we can see her obviously feel better about having somebody she can at least speak to openly and honestly. all of that said, Darren, as they go along, have we been glancing over one of the more poignant questions, which is how did the driver get out of the driveway that had the bar on it? Because this jerk of a fare of his went upstairs and left him stuck in a dead end that he would have had to back out of, and didn't seem like it was an easy thing. Is that the worst crime emotionally of the movie?
Emotionally, man, I don't really have an answer for that. I was just reading about Ethan Hawke's divorce, so let's bring that up for a moment. Just
he got divorced from Uma Thurman. Yeah,
right.
Which he wrote about in a fictional account called Light in the Darkness or something like that. I cannot remember exactly, and it's
but it was
funny
right before this movie was made, I believe.
He cheated on her before the movie was made. And then she found out about it after the movie was made and filed for divorce. He screwed up royally.
Yes, he did.
Hardcore screwed up. And like the book that he wrote about it, he does not pull any punches on the fictional character that's going through what he went through is very much portrayed as one of the biggest idiots in the world. Rightfully so.
Yeah, but the thing is, this found a lot of resonance with critics. This was embraced very warmly. Tristan, we're sitting here and we, sort of tongue in cheek at certain points. We've been ragging on Jesse and stuff like that, but there was a very warm reception that people had to this film, and some people received it more warmly even than the first. So obviously, there's something about this that works for everyone. Even though we're often told you can't have a movie just with two people talking to each other, they have to be doing things and stuff has to happen. And it's really a vibe movie in a lot of ways. So in terms of that resonance, though, is there an aspect of this film that you think is in any way experimental? That is anything that is unexpected in the way that it is shot or put together? Because basically, obviously, everybody loves the performances and everything. I'm just trying to get at, do you see anything that would make somebody react to this and say, oh, this is so fresh and different the way they're approaching the way it's put together?
No, I wouldn't really say that it's fresh or different or anything like that. I'd say it's classic indie. It's something that we saw a lot of in the 90s. Like it's a successor to something that existed in the 90s that thrived in the 90s, and this is that type of indie film where that's all you need. It's conversation based. I feel like there are more movies exist like this than don't, and I think they just don't get publicized. The award circuit, they don't have Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy and Linklater as a driving force behind them. And I think that definitely helps in this situation. So no, I wouldn't say this. No. Opposite of experimental. This is very mainstream in terms of how it approaches a story. Even though it's just two people talking, it has a very clear defined beginning, middle, and end, and chopped up basically in 30-minute increments of first meeting, getting comfortable, and just letting loose, and like pouring out emotionally. And
wait, so that means, John, you would rather they chop this into 3 episodes streamed, and then you watch them in like
back to back. Oh yeah, no,
oh yeah.
This should be released on Disney Plus as 3 separate episodes, half-hour episodes. Then that I could watch out of sequence if I wanted to.
Deep fade to black in the middle.
No, it absolutely would be wonderful. But Tristan, I agree with you. There's nothing particularly groundbreaking with the photography or anything like that. Do you think though that it advances any of the visual language of the first one? Do you see a more refined Linklater and Daniel?
Yes, I think it absolutely it does something different where, like in the first one, it takes the course over 12 hours and it's very voyeuristic, and you feel like a tourist, and in a good way. And with this one, it almost takes place in real time, pretty much in real time. Like 90 minutes of the movie is 90 minutes in real life, which is crazy. And it was all shot in the afternoon because they had to shoot it in the afternoon. Like everything was in that magical glowy yellow and orange and everything like that. And that was a challenge, but they did it in 15 days. Mm-hmm. They shot all of this in 15 days, only shooting in the afternoons. That's awesome. And that means that they had nothing but preparation and practice and rehearsal time. And just like they did with the first one.
And no surprise rainstorms.
And no surprise rainstorm. And so like, to me, I feel like that in itself, that like They had less money to work with, less time, but they were able to get it done. And if you look on Rotten Tomatoes, I know Rotten Tomatoes isn't a great indicator for movies that existed before Rotten Tomatoes, but this one is up in the mid 90s for critics as well as audience. It got a Criterion release, and so I think that in itself advanced it. But one thing I do want to talk about is, like we're all kind of talking about the fact about how Jesse's married and he shouldn't be acting like this, as a married man, which is 100% truth. However, what's funny is as audience members, what we forgive is on screen is something that we would never forgive in real life. How often do we as audience members say out loud, why don't they just kill him?
Oh, yes. Very true.
Right?
I think that is
right. Like, don't leave me hanging here. Like, there's so many times when, like, I will say, like, oh, God, if they just killed him, like, life would be easier. And that's not something you would ever say in real life.
The character has more morals than you do in that moment. You're like, but it's a movie, so it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
But the thing is, I think that what it is it's a basic manipulation tactic of a filmmaker or of a playwright or of anybody else who puts a dramatic work together. Is essentially, it's like arguing before a jury. We're the jury. And so the case, instead of getting the case in court where the lawyer has to come up and try to say, yeah. Okay, I understand that they broke the rules, but you have to consider all of this stuff that happened beforehand. Come on. And they try to build a sympathetic case. We get the sympathetic case first, so that when we arrive at the point of judgment, we're predisposed to say, well, yeah, but I know Jesse's a good person, and I know that he didn't really mean it. I think he's unhappy in his marriage. I don't want the guy to be unhappy. I mean, he even says he doesn't want to be 52 and wake up and realize one day that he's trapped in his marriage and it's a terrible thing. If anything, people would say, I would argue, well, yes, he should get out of his marriage. He's going about it the incorrect way because he should put the cart, he's putting the cart before the horse here. He should instead first go to his wife at the time and say, this is unresolvable. We need to get a lawyer involved. We need to blah, 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 blah. And whatever other sort of stuff has to go on. And we would say that is the right way to do it. So he does it the wrong way, but we're able to say, well, okay, he went about it wrong, but he's living his truth and doing the right thing for him. Right? That sort of thing.
I hate you. I hate that.
I know.
And
that, ladies and gentlemen, is why I specifically use the phrase, because this is our walk around Paris, and I love to do that. No. Yes.
Well, and
gets under my skin.
Yeah, it's not the right way, but and again, it's all like I mentioned before. We all knew that line when he's saying, "Oh, but I'm not happy." Like, we know why that's in there. We know how that's meant to manipulate us as an audience. Just like there's no scene of him having to take a phone call and chat with his son who misses him to put, like, it's a story. You could put that in there. It could be right in there, but there wasn't. That wasn't there. His
cell phones were a lot harder to come by. And
true.
This is pre-iPhone. Okay,
so, but one thing that's interesting from an audience perspective, since we're kind of on that right now, is when you look at it from another person's perspective. Say that you are Julie Delpy's parents. I'm sorry, Celine's parents. Or say that you are Jesse's wife or friend or something like that. Like, Celine is telling them about Jesse and about that night in Vienna. Jesse is telling his wife about Celine and that night in Vienna and everything like that. And so they have to convince other people about the magic of that night. But they don't have to convince us, because there was 3 people there in Vienna. There was Celine, there was Jesse, and there was us. And so they already know we are a sympathetic audience.
Every moment we were there.
And so Linklater knows he has us. He knows that we're invested. It's like, if you saw Before Sunrise, you are invested in these people and you want them to be together. So you're going to forgive a lot of things. And that gets tested hard in the next one.
Yes, it does. It does.
Don't be spoiling the next one for me, guys.
But see, with this being, I think one of the shots in here lasts 11 minutes, which is, that's a long shot.
Over 3 days. I don't know how they did it, but
what I want to say is that I think that something that gets overlooked with this film is the sound, because that's not easy in a Parisian street as you're strolling through to get clean enough sound. And so obviously there's other, there's recording you got to do later. There's got to pick up stuff and all of those sorts of things. I think that that there is a real accomplishment here, that there's nothing that sounds later studio added. There's nothing that sounds poorly recorded or anything like that. Like, I expect that of a film like this, especially knowing the production history and basically it's guerrilla filmmaking, for them to get the clean sound. I mean, I don't work in the industry, obviously, but I have seen enough movies to say that seems like something of an accomplishment. I mean, am I off base there?
A good movie can do replacement without you knowing it.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're doing a tracking shot like that, more often than not, it's fake sound. Hawk and Delpy are wearing lapels, and then you have, nat sound captured by a shotgun.
Well,
I'm not.
I mean,
I'm
I know.
not trying to minimize it whatsoever.
I know the how, but I'm like, for it not to sound like authentic sound at any point, I found to be
yes,
a true achievement.
Absolutely. And I'm not trying to minimize that whatsoever. It is. Is it impossible?
Stop
No.
minimizing him, Tristan.
This is his revenge for me saying live your truth.
I couldn't place the scene, but I do remember having a moment in watching this where I noticed the sound in a good way, where I was like, maybe she was making tea or something was happening on the screen. And I was like, wow, that I'm hearing exactly what I'm expecting to hear. It's very, it didn't pull me out, but when you mentioned that, John, it made me think that I did have that moment during this movie of just good sound. So yes.
I mean, I have to also say that Julie Delpy wrote 2 of the 3 songs we hear, including the one that plays over the credits. And I think that I think the music was wonderful, but this is in some ways a lot like, I would say, Dog Day Afternoon, where, Darren, did you notice the lack of soundtrack throughout the course of the film? Like, there's no like heavy musical hits or anything, or did you have any moment where you're like, oh wait, there's no like score here? Like, what? Wow. Okay.
No, it didn't really occur to me, but it's such a out and about natural that, I mean, yeah, if they had maybe a little more diegetic music of like going by someone. Well, actually, I do recall in the very beginning, they walk by someone who's like playing an accordion. It's like really, really obvious. I remember that moment, but yeah, no, they're right. There is no score in that regard, but I didn't think it needed it. I didn't feel like I
agree.
it.
I agree completely, but I just think it's such a refreshing change
on the waltz. I think that building to that, and that actually is the music part. I think that, not to say that if you had music, the waltz wouldn't be as impactful, but not having music did help underscore the waltz.
I just from one other aspect, as warmly received as this film was, it obviously wasn't like a huge blockbuster sort of thing.
But however, okay, it had a budget of 2 to 2.7 million, and it earned back 16 million.
Yes, 16 million, which is successful.
In terms of return of investment, it's very good.
But I'm saying that for a film that didn't have that sort of, obviously, $100 million box office or anything like that, do you think that part of the charm of this movie is getting to be a fan of it and spread the news, as Sean Eastridge from Missing Frames got to do with me, where he brought me along for this ride? And do you think that part of the joy of this film is getting to share it with people? Is this one of those movies that has found its life because people love to talk about it?
I think it is, mainly because of the first one, though. Like, I'm not going to go around and say, like, hey, have you seen Before Sunrise? And they go, no. And I'm like, well, let's watch Before Sunset.
Good point.
So I feel like I want to say yes, but mainly because of Sunrise. Jeez, this is hard.
It does. It gets difficult.
Yeah, because like I was very much the person like where I had my DVD copy of the first one and I was walking around. I'm like, have you seen this? No, let's watch it together. Have you seen this? No, you're pretty. Let's watch this together. And then I'm like, did you know that there is a second one? Let's watch it. So it's very much like, did you like the first one? Let's watch the second one. And so, yeah, so I can't really say this is because of it, but I do want to ask you guys a question now that we're talking about the first and second at the same time.
Yes, it should be called Sunrise Strike Back. Okay. I'm sorry.
There you go.
It's just what it should be.
This is what Roger Ebert wrote about the second one. Before Sunrise was a remarkable celebration of the fascination of good dialogue, but Before Sunset is better, perhaps because the characters are older and wiser, perhaps because they have more to lose or win, perhaps because Hawke and Delpy wrote the dialogue themselves. And Manola Dargis said Sunset is deeper, truer work of art than the first, and praised Linklater for his filmmaking, saying it keeps faith with American cinema at its finest. Darren, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about Sunset compared to Sunrise in that regard? Because this is on top 100 lists.
Mm-hmm.
This movie is beloved by critics and audiences alike. But I'm getting the sense that you didn't like it as much as the first one.
Yeah, I mean, not that we're getting to ratings, but we're kind of getting to ratings. I'm kind of inclined to give this a 4. Like, it's still really good, but I enjoyed Before Sunrise more. And I think it's a sum of its parts kind of vibe. It's not like, oh, well, yeah, they had that scene and or I just didn't like the story overall. It's just, I like more about what the first movie did in general. In this one, it's a shorter amount of time they're spending together. It's like I kind of called out, I didn't really like the aspects of the less truthfulness of the characters, and that kind of slowed it down a bit. Obviously the infidelity talk is, but at its core, it is a story about the one that got away came back into your life. What would you do? Like, that's an interesting story. Nothing in this movie, and I've, like you had said, Tristan, I had read little bits, or I think I had heard that this one had been regarded equal, if not better, than the first, but it just didn't really come across like that to me. I don't think, again, not in a negative, but I think I'm giving this a 4.
Everything that you're saying, Darren, I truly do. And I don't discount it. I won't be like Tristan with me and just dismiss it out of hand and just move on. I, however, agree with Ebert that part of what makes this work is, while the framing is roughly the same and these are the same characters, the stakes are more interesting, I guess. Because when they're kids and they're going around and they're having this crazy night, that's the impetuousness of youth. That is something that fades very quickly when you have your different responsibilities come into your life and everything like that. I think that Sunset is a film that resonates more when you are, when you can relate somewhat to Jesse and Celine talking about their frustrations with this is the pain, feels like too big a word, but I'll just go ahead and use it. This feels like the pain of people who never wanted to let go of that innocence and idealism of youth and were forced to. And they're sitting here talking to the one other person that truly understood what that meant to them. It's Jesse and Celine, even more than finding out that they are in love with each other from back then. I think that Jesse and Celine, what they discover in this film is that they're in love with who they were and they don't like who they've become necessarily. And this relationship here that happens in this film are two people giving themselves permission to say, maybe I can be that person again. Does it work? I'm not coming down on that. I'm not saying anything there. I'm saying and I'm not saying it's a good idea. The usual disclaimers and everything like that. I'm saying that's what I think makes this film work so well. This is two people who are trying to find themselves again. The debate more is about whether trying to find it through somebody else. I mean, ironically, Celine's saying, I don't need anybody else, but she's finding herself by reaching out to someone else. And Jesse's sort of doing the same thing here. And I think that's probably what makes it such a rich experience, at least from my perspective. I mean, Tristan, where do you fall with it? You're the one that asked the question, for Pete's sake. You sit here silent, just listen to us talk. Feel a little cheated right now.
I have actually been silent for most of this episode because I've been really enjoying what you guys have been saying. And Darren, I want to read you another thing from a review. This one is from the New York Times by A.O. Scott. And he says that it was sometimes maddening but also enthralling precisely because of its casual disregard for the usual imperatives of screenwriting. He says, can't they just say what they mean? Can you? Language, after all, is not just about points and meanings. It is a medium of communication, yes, but also of avoidance, misdirection, self-protection, and plain confusion, all of which are among the themes of this movie, which captures a deep truth seldom acknowledged on screen or in books. So A.O. Scott is telling you why you were wrong.
Yes.
In how you're feeling, and is invalidating you. And I just wanted to make that clear.
No,
Yeah, no, I get that. And I like, a lot of the key points he said, because you're right. They are, I mean, it really starts when she shows up. It's like, why did she go there? Why did she? And it was because he couldn't search her out in that regard. And then I totally get the aspect of the defenses slowly being lowered and the questions. And as they're talking about, where they are in their lives. And they talk about, I mean, in the beginning when he says everything, the world's actually getting better. And she's like, you're absolutely wrong. And let me tell you why. And I think all those scenes are very important because, you want to hear about how these characters have grown and their opinions and what's the same and what's different. I guess at its core, I cannot give them a pass for how things turned out because they are the ones who made such poor choices on the lack of communication in the first movie. They could have avoided this. I get the romance of one night, and we'll never see each other again, but they could have done more to actually be able to contact each other. So 4 stars, standing firm.
No, and that's fair.
Let me quote you another review from
the trick here is that something that I think is unavoidable for me, I'm not saying for everybody, but something that I think is unavoidable for me is I look at Before Sunset and it's a snapshot in time of the sort of almost like a last moment, a last hurrah before online connection stalking of people you knew in college and high school and at previous jobs and all that stuff became a way of life. And this is not me saying social media bad. I'm saying that what it did, in a sense, is you look at this movie coming out in 2004. This is an odd thing. Now I look at this and I say, well, Jesse would have just looked her up on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, all of these different things. He'd have found her. Maybe he would make contact. Maybe he wouldn't. And he would go search her out and all of those sorts of things. There's a really odd moment in time here because it literally is right before that dam breaks. And I just think it's fascinating because of that. Yes.
Looking for hot French chick.
No, Tristan, don't hit enter. Don't hit enter.
God,
no.
sorry.
The grandma.
Jeez.
Dead grandma. No, it makes me think of, you're right. It's a moment in time that there's also nostalgia for as well. I've heard the joke of what cell phones would completely get rid of any plot drama in any Seinfeld episode. Because half of an episode is we were going to meet up over here, but then we didn't. And then I missed you. And then I came over here. And it's if we all had cell phones, this would literally not be a plot.
And conversely, the show 24 wouldn't have been able to exist without cell phones.
Yes.
Exactly.
It's just kind of interesting how storytelling can change. I'm going to give my rating 4.5 because I love this movie. I think it's fantastic. I think it's great. And I'm giving it a 4.5 because it would feel wrong to give it 5 stars because to me personally, because the first one put me in awe. I'm an evangelist for that movie. I can feel it in my bones and I love it. And I just didn't feel the same way Before Sunset. And I'm not saying I felt less. It just felt very different. And yeah, I guess I am kind of saying less.
Tristan
then because
says different movie made him feel differently.
Yes, that's my review and I'm sticking with it. No, so I'm giving it 4.5 just because I'm just giving that little half-star difference because I just feel like it could have been a little bit longer. We could have had I don't see, man. I just feel like I'm picking things. I'm giving it 4.5 because I want to give it 4.5.
Yes.
I can't really justify it other than
that's accurate.
It did not hit me as hard as the first one. That's the only reason I'm giving it.
And that's fine. I will ascend above the two of you and give it a 5. And the reason I will give it a 5 is because I think that while we definitely indulged, very carefully saying we would never do a thing like it's a movie and I don't want Jesse behaving the way I would. That's not as interesting because I know how the way I behave, this movie never happens. And that's not very interesting. But in terms of character study, this movie recognizes you're here because of the first one. You are, like you said, Tristan, you're already invested. And at the end of this movie, and this is going to be weird, and I feel weird even saying it, I ache for these characters because, like I was saying, I don't think they're even looking for each other in this. They're looking for themselves. And then at the end, what I ache for is, no, are they, like at the end of Before Sunrise, I'm saying, gosh, I hope they get back together. And in this one, I'm terrified if they do, and I'm terrified if they don't. But it doesn't leave me hanging in an awful way. It leaves me hanging in that discussion way, which a movie like this, if I don't walk out of it able to have a discussion like this with my two friends, like the movie's a waste. This movie is not a waste because I've seen it multiple times and I have a conversation like this every time, just like I do with the first one. So 5 stars from me on this.
One last question to both of you, because it just struck me. And they obviously reference and talk quite a bit about that night, but could this movie be watched on its own? Like if someone
I think so.
didn't know that the first one existed, they went to Blockbuster and Blockbuster didn't have their A game on and it didn't have all 3 right next to each other for some reason. Do you think you could just watch this as its own movie? Does it have enough glue and foundation?
I think so.
I would never have given it 5 if I didn't think that, because it catches you.
That's true.
Catches you up.
You are a stickler for that.
Big stickler for that.
I don't think that you aren't always fair with that, in my opinion.
Oh yes, I am.
There's
I'm a perfect arbiter.
When
I'm the judge.
A sequel is a reward for longtime fans. Just throwing that out.
See, I think something's broken, John, because I'm looking at the stats and the last 4 movies you've all given 5. So is the 5 key stuck on your computer?
I'll tell you what's going to be stuck is something I don't want to. So, but I can say that I fully embrace this stretch of 5s because I think that the last 4 are exactly, I mean, what I think could be a very fascinating discussion point is how different these 4 movies are. Well, I mean, not the last 2, obviously, but like, it's a learning journey for all of us.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Before Sunrise, and Before Sunset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tune in next week, folks, and see whether the 5 streak remains. And Darren, what is it that we're going to be covering next week?
Well, they go away from the S alliteration, but next week we're going to be talking about 2013's Before Midnight, at the time, conclusion of the Richard Linklater Before trilogy, here on Houselights.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.